It all started with a simple message on her phone, a message that shattered everything I thought I knew. One night, one discovery, and the life I had built with Rebecca began to crumble before my eyes. The glass of our perfect life cracked, and as I tried to hold the pieces together, I found myself facing a truth I wasn't ready to accept. Love isn't always enough, and sometimes, the person you trust the most is the one who can break you. I'm Ethan, and I'm 29 years old. I thought I had everything figured out. I had a great job, a beautiful home, and most importantly, I was married to Rebecca. She's 30, just a year older than me, but that never mattered. I loved her energy, her smile, and the way she could light up a room just by walking into it. We were the couple everyone talked about, the ones who had it all together, or at least, that's what I believed. Our story began 5 years ago, and from the moment I met her, I was captivated. Rebecca wasn't just another person in my life, she was the person. We laughed together, dreamed together, and made plans for a future that seemed bright and unbreakable. We were building a life that I thought was perfect, one that could weather any storm, but I guess, in the end, it was all too perfect. Like a piece of glass, shiny, flawless, but fragile. And when that glass shattered, it cut me in ways I never imagined. It all started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Rebecca became distant, her laughter less frequent, her touch less warm. I convinced myself that it was just stress. Work had been demanding for both of us, and maybe we were just going through a rough patch. I'd read about this kind of thing, how relationships can ebb and flow, how the honeymoon phase doesn't last forever. So, I gave her space, hoping that whatever was bothering her would pass, but it didn't pass. It got worse. Late nights at work became more common for Rebecca. She'd come home exhausted, barely speaking to me before collapsing into bed. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me vague answers, brushing off my concerns. There was something in her eyes that I couldn't quite place, something guarded, distant. But I pushed those thoughts aside, telling myself I was being paranoid. One evening, I decided to surprise her at her office. I'd bring her dinner, maybe some flowers, and we'd have a little date night right there at work. It was something spontaneous, something I thought would rekindle the spark between us. But when I arrived, Rebecca wasn't at her desk. Her colleague, a woman named Sarah, looked surprised to see me. She left hours ago, Sarah said, looking puzzled. I thought you knew. I didn't know. And that was the first real crack in the glass. Before things started falling apart, we had some truly beautiful moments. I remember our trips to the coast, where we'd walk along the beach, hand in hand, talking about our future. We'd sit by the fire at night, wrapped in a blanket, with the sound of the waves crashing in the background. Those were the moments I cherished, the ones I held onto when things started to go wrong. Rebecca had this way of making the simplest things feel special. A lazy Sunday morning, cooking breakfast together, would turn into a memory I'd treasure. She'd playfully steal my bacon, laughing when I'd pretend to be annoyed. We'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing, lost in our little world. I guess that's why it was so hard for me to see the truth. I was blinded by those happy memories, convinced that they were enough to carry us through anything. But happiness can be deceiving, like the calm before a storm. The night I discovered the truth was the night everything changed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I started paying closer attention. I noticed Rebecca's phone was always on silent, and she'd get defensive if I asked about her day. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but my gut was telling me something was wrong. One night, when she was in the shower, her phone buzzed. I don't know what possessed me, but I picked it up. There was a message from someone named Chris. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Last night was amazing. My heart stopped. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I read the message over and over, hoping it was some kind of misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew what it meant. The glass had finally shattered. When Rebecca came out of the shower, I confronted her. I expected her to deny it, to tell me it was nothing. But she didn't. She just stood there, staring at me with that same distant look in her eyes. And then she said it, the words that tore everything apart. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't mean for this to happen. She told me about Chris, a guy she'd met through work. It started as just a friendship, she said, but things got out of hand. She didn't want to hurt me, but she couldn't stop herself. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. I couldn't stay in the house that night. I grabbed my keys and left, driving aimlessly through the city, trying to make sense of everything. I ended up at the beach, the same beach where we'd spent so many happy moments together. But now, those memories were tainted, and I didn't know if I could ever look at that place the same way again. In the weeks that followed, I tried to hold on to the good times we'd had. I'd close my eyes and remember our wedding day, the way Rebecca looked as she walked down the aisle, the way she smiled at me as we said our vows. I'd think about the first time we said I love you, how nervous I was, and how happy I felt when she said it back, but those memories, as beautiful as they were, couldn't erase the pain of what she'd done. They were like band-aids on a deep wound, offering temporary relief but not healing the hurt underneath. We tried to work through it, to salvage what we had left. Rebecca said she was sorry, that she wanted to make things right. But trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. Every time she was late coming home, every time her phone buzzed, I felt that familiar pang of doubt. I wanted to forgive her, to move on, but the betrayal was too deep. We went to counseling, talked about our feelings, tried to reconnect. There were moments when it felt like we might actually make it, like we could find our way back to each other. But those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the reality of what had happened. One night, as we sat on the couch in silence, I realized that the love we once had was gone. It wasn't Rebecca who had changed, it was me. I couldn't look at her the same way, couldn't trust her the way I once did. And without trust, love doesn't stand a chance. It took a long time for me to accept that our marriage was over. I didn't want to give up, didn't want to be another statistic, another failed relationship. But sometimes, holding on does more damage than letting go. Rebecca and I had a long talk, the kind we should have had months ago. We were honest with each other, finally. She admitted that she didn't know if she could ever fully regain my trust, and I admitted that I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. We both cried, not just for what we were losing, but for what we had already lost. In the end, we decided to part ways. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. We agreed to be civil, to respect each other's space, and to move on with our lives separately. The divorce was amicable as these things can be. But it still hurt like hell. Now, months later, I'm trying to pick up the pieces. I moved into a new apartment, started focusing more on my career, and I'm even considering therapy to help me process everything. Some days are better than others. There are times when I miss Rebecca, miss the life we had, but I remind myself that it wasn't real, not the way I thought it was. I've learned a lot about myself through this process. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive even when everything falls apart. I've learned that love isn't always enough, and that sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is to let go. I'm not sure what the future holds for me, but I'm hopeful. I know that I'll find happiness again, maybe not in the way I once imagined, but in a new way, a better way. And when I do, I'll be ready. For now, I'm just taking it one day at a time, learning to trust again, and slowly, putting the pieces of my life back together.